Good morning. I'm Stephen Leake. I'm an elder at First Presbyterian Church of Mesquite, Texas, and I'm also the teacher of the Discipleship Sunday School class there. Today we're going to conclude chapter 7, which is the end of the Festival of the Tabernacles. And we're going to start chapter 8, which begins with the story of the woman caught in adultery. Again, our curriculum is based on the daily Bible study series by Professor William Barclay, and we're using the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, which is the Bible that we have in our pews at our church. So let's get started with our first scripture lesson. John 7:45 through 52. Then the temple police went back to the priests and Pharisees, who asked them, "Why did you not arrest him?" The police answered, "Never has anyone spoken like this." Then the Pharisees replied, "Surely you have not been deceived too, have you? Has any one of the authorities or of the Pharisees believed in him? But this crowd, which does not know the law, they are accursed." Nicodemus, who had gone to Jesus before, and who was with one of them, asked, "Our law does not judge people without first giving them a hearing to find out what they are doing, does it?" They replied, "Well, surely you are not also from Galilee, are you? Search and you will see that no prophet is to arise from Galilee." Here we have certain vivid reactions to Jesus. First, the reaction of the officers was bewildered amazement. They had gone out to arrest Jesus and had come back without him, because never in their lives had they heard anyone speak as he did. Jesus must have had such a magnificent aura of charisma. It reminds me of the sentence before Pilate passed sentence on Jesus. He said, "Behold the man." Second, the reaction of the chief priests and the Pharisees was contempt. The Pharisees had a phrase by which they described ordinary people who did not observe the thousands of regulations of ceremonial law. They called them the people of the land. To them, they were beneath contempt. Rabbis taught that the masses who do not know the law are accursed. They were not to be trusted and not to be made fiduciaries or custodians. It was forbidden to travel with them or to entertain them or to be entertained by them. The Pharisees looked down in contempt on the ordinary people, Jesus Christ included. It's indeed a terrible thing when people think themselves too good to need Jesus Christ. Third, there was the reaction of Nicodemus. It was a timid reaction, for he did not defend Jesus directly. He dared only to quote certain legal maxims which were relevant. The law laid it down that all must receive justice. And part of justice was the right to state a case and not to be condemned on secondhand hearsay information. The Pharisees proposed to break that law, but it's clear that Nicodemus did not protest further. Nicodemus did not carry his protest any further. His heart told him to defend Jesus, but his head told him not to take the risk. The Pharisees told him that obviously no prophet could come out of Galilee. Then they taunted him for having a connection with the Galilean rabble, and he said no more. Often we find ourselves in a situation in which we would like to defend Jesus and in which we know we ought to show our colors. And often we make a half-hearted defense and are reduced to an uncomfortable and ashamed silence. In our defense of Jesus Christ, it is better to be reckless with our hearts than prudent with our heads. To stand up for him may bring us mockery and unpopularity. It may even bring hardship and sacrifice. Loyalty to Christ may produce a hardship on earth, but it brings a crown in eternity. Now, this next passage of Scripture, 7 verse 53 through 8:11, is quite interesting because in the earliest manuscripts, it was not included. In fact, in the Revised Standard Version of the Bible, not the New Revised Standard Version that we're using in this class, but in the predecessor to this version, the Revised Standard Version, it was included, but only as a footnote, not as an actual part of the Scripture. So, this story of the woman caught in adultery has had a very interesting past, and it would be a shame if it was not included in our Scripture, because it's a wonderful story with a wonderful lesson. Now, today we're just going to study the bare bones of it, and next week we'll study the meaning of it. 7:53 through 8:11. Then each of them went home, while Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came, and he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and making her stand before all of them, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And once again he bent down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the elders, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on, do not sin again." The scribes and Pharisees were out to get some charge on which they could discredit Jesus. Here they thought they had impaled him on the horns of a dilemma. When a legal question arose, it was routinely taken to a rabbi for a decision. So the scribes and the Pharisees approached Jesus as a rabbi to challenge him with a question of a woman taken in adultery. In the eyes of Jewish law, adultery was a serious crime. Adultery was one of the 3 gravest sins and was punishable by death. The Mishnah reiterates that death by stoning is the penalty for a girl who is betrothed and who then commits adultery. From the purely legal point of view, the scribes and Pharisees were perfectly correct. This woman was liable to death by stoning. The dilemma into which they sought to put Jesus was this. If he said that the woman ought to be stoned to death, 2 things followed. First, he would lose the name he had gained for himself through love and mercy, and would never again be called the friend of sinners. Second, he would come into jeopardy with Roman law, for the Jews had no power to pass or carry out the death sentence on anyone. If he said the woman should be pardoned, it could be immediately said that he was teaching the people to break the law of Moses. They could also charge that he was condoning and even encouraging them to commit adultery. That was the trap into which the scribes and Pharisees sought to lure Jesus. But he turned their attack in such a way that it recoiled against them. At first, Jesus stooped down and wrote with his finger on the ground. Why did he do that? There may be 4 possible reasons. First, he may quite simply have wished to gain time and not be rushed into a decision. In that brief moment, he may have been both thinking the thing out and taking it to God. Second, certain manuscripts add, as though he did not hear them. Jesus may well have deliberately forced the scribes and Pharisees to repeat their charges. By repeating them, they might possibly become aware of the cruelty behind them. Third, in this situation, Jesus may have not been able to face the curiosity of the crowd, the cruelty of the accusers, or the shame of the woman. This all combined to twist the heart of Jesus in agony and pity, so that he hid his eyes. Fourth, the Armenian translation suggests that he was writing with his finger on the earth to declare their sins. The suggestion is that Jesus was writing in the dust the sins of the very men who were accusing the woman. It may be that Jesus was confronting these self-confident sadists with a record of their own sins. However that may be, the scribes and Pharisees continued to insist on an answer, and they got it. The word for without sin means not only without sin, but it can also mean with a willful desire. Jesus said, "You may stone her, but only if you never wanted to do the same thing yourselves." There was a silence, and slowly the accusers drifted away. So Jesus and the woman were left alone. As Augustine put it, there remained a great misery and a great pity. Jesus said to the woman, "Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. Jesus said, "I am not going to pass judgment on you either. Go and make a new start, and don't sin anymore." Well, that's our lesson for this week. Next week, we'll continue with the story of the woman caught in adultery and explain it more fully and talk about what it means to us today as Christians. God bless you all, and thank you for joining me.